Back when we lectured last about the victory at Gettysburg for the Union. It was a big victory. The Confederates had to retreat back to Virginia. Lee's plans of splitting the capital off and causing Union soldiers to lose their will to fight all failed. And so while this is going on in the Eastern Theater, the Confederates have lost Vicksburg. They have successfully had the Confederacy split in half, which was the Union goal at the start of the war. The Union gains all the territory back in Tennessee. Look out Mount Missionary Ridge. And things are starting to wind down for the Confederacy, mainly because of loss of men. And that'll take us to our subtopic today, which is the beginning of the end. How many times, Mr. Foote, has Lincoln changed overall commanders that you're aware of?
3 times?
3 or 4, I think 4 by this. Well, it's after the victory at Vicksburg in Tennessee and Gettysburg that he finally picks the right guy to finish us off. Who does he pick as overall commander? Ulysses S. Grant. Shh. Ulysses S. Grant is finally appointed as overall commander of Union forces. That happened on March 9th of 1864. Finally, President Lincoln has his man, the man that will finish this off and be successful, who will not be afraid to fight, who will not be afraid to win or lose lives to do so. Ulysses S. Grant.
I didn't think the last guy was either.
Well, he only because they found the battle plans, remember? So, shh. Quiet. I repeat things a million times. March 9th, 1864. President Lincoln finally makes the right decision and appoints Ulysses S. Grant, who's on your ID sheet, as overall commander of Union forces. Okay? You're going to buy me a Diet Pepsi if I find it. You on? Well, I don't know. Let's look back here. I'm going to put it on there twice. Okay? Now, after Grant is listed overall commander of Union forces, he and Union General William T. Sherman set up a strategy to end this war. They have gained control of the Mississippi. They've gained control of Tennessee. They have control of the Tennessee-Georgia border. And what's going to happen is General William T. Sherman is going to leave Chattanooga, where they just won, with 100,000 troops. And which state is he going to invade? Georgia. Remember we talked about this. And he's going to come this way, invading Georgia and heading up. And who's he going to meet in Virginia? General Grant. And they're going to pin the Confederates and take over Richmond and win the war. That's their strategy. Okay?
So, he said... Say that last part again.
Okay. Where's Grant going to station himself? In the Eastern Theater. Where's he going to be fighting the next battles? Virginia. Down here in Tennessee, on the Tennessee-Georgia border, will be William T. Sherman, Union General. He's going to strip through Georgia and head up through the South and meet with Grant and pin the Confederacy at Richmond.
I thought you meant they were fighting. I was really confused.
Fighting each other?
Yeah.
No, they're fighting on the same side.
That's why I was...
Yeah, and they're going to pin them together.
Where is he going to meet Richmond? Okay.
Now, Sherman is going to hook horns, so to speak, in Georgia with Confederate General Joe Johnston. We talked about him before. Not Albert Johnston, who was killed, but Joe Johnston. So Sherman is going to hook up horns with Confederate General Joe Johnston. And all Johnston's going to do this entire time when he's attacked by Sherman and his 100,000 troops is fight like the Dickens and destroy railroads and bridges as he retreats. Why is Confederate General Johnston destroying railroad lines and bridges as he retreats.
That way the Union can get more
It'll
troops.
slow the Union down in their assault to Georgia. So he really has no chance of victory. He's outnumbered big time. And all he's going to try to do is try to fight as defensive as he can. He will fight like the Dickens. He will fight heroically. And as he retreats, after loss, after loss, after loss, he will burn railroad lines and bridges. Finally, Sherman presses from the Tennessee-Georgia border, and what major city does he enter on September 2nd of 1864? What's the most important city in Georgia? Super Bowl's going to be there in 2 weeks. Atlanta. So Sherman marches from the Tennessee-Georgia border, keeps fighting Confederate General Johnson and his troops, and by September 2nd of 1864, he walks into Atlanta. That would be Sherman. And he orders the bombing of Atlanta, and he orders the cutting of all railroad lines into the city from all directions. He wants nothing to be able to come into the city of Atlanta. He's going to treat Atlanta like they treated Vicksburg. So Sherman orders the bombing of Atlanta. He's going to cut all railroad lines into the city. He's not going to let any supplies come in, food, medicine, etc., for several weeks, forcing the people of Atlanta into submission and surrender. That's his goal. And he does. They pound Atlanta for several weeks. And without food, water, medicine, the people finally cannot hold out any longer, and they surrender. Okay? So he's completing his mission of running through Georgia with the idea of turning up through the Carolinas and meeting Grant in Virginia. So, again, General Sherman orders the bombing of Atlanta. He cuts all railroad lines into the city. He bombs Atlanta for several weeks. And without food, water, and medicine, the people of Atlanta can hold on no longer, and they surrender. Sherman leaves Atlanta in flames and heads towards the sea. Okay? So he's going to head right towards the sea here and eventually make his way through the Carolinas. So he leaves Atlanta in flames and heads towards the sea. You know what he's going to do? You know what his goal is from this point on? He and his troops are simply going to live off the land and, quote, make Georgia howl, which is on your ID sheet. They are simply going to live off the land and make Georgia howl. What does that mean, make Georgia howl?
Sure.
What? What's that mean, make Georgia howl? If Donovan Cook, I'm gonna take his pop and take his earbuds and I'm gonna make Donovan howl. What am I gonna do? Just make him miserable. Just make him miserable. Take everything he has. Oh yeah, let me use those AirPods. Oh, I don't like them that much. No, let me see your pop. I'm kind of thirsty. Dump it out. I mean, it's kind of the same comparison. They simply were going to live off the land. Anything they didn't want, they destroyed. And they were going to make Georgia howl. Why did Sherman treat them so poorly? Because he wanted the people of the South to suffer as much as possible, forever considering doing what? Seceding from the Union. So William T. Sherman was a vindictive son of a gun, and he wanted to make the people of the South suffer as much as possible for their decision to secede from the Union. And during his march to the sea, he practiced total war. So I want to mention this again so you understand. General Sherman leaves Atlanta in flames, heads towards the sea. His plan, as the Union troops marched through Georgia, was to have them live off the land and make Georgia howl. He wanted to make the people of the South suffer as much as possible for their decision to secede from the Union. So his march to the sea from Atlanta, he will practice what we know as total war. I'll give you 4 examples of what total war was. Okay? Total war. Number 1. They would seize or destroy anything along their route that may benefit the Confederacy. First example of total war. They would either seize or destroy anything along their way that they thought might be beneficial to the Confederacy. Okay? They would seize or destroy anything along the way that may benefit the Confederacy. Number two, they would destroy all railroad lines during their march. They would destroy all railroad lines during their march. Number three, the Union soldiers would feed on all rich farm products from southern farms throughout their march. They would feed on all rich farm products from southern farms throughout their march. They would take anything they wanted concerning farm products. And number four, what would they do with anything they didn't want along the way concerning farm products? Destroy it or simply throw it away to rot. So, total war, number one, the Union seized or destroyed anything along the way that may benefit the Confederacy. Number two, the Union destroyed all railroad lines during their march. Number three, Union soldiers fed on rich farm products from southern farms throughout their march. And number four, anything the Union did not want, they simply destroyed or threw away to rot. You think they left one cow alive? Not a chance. If they went through a dairy farm or they went through a farm down there, a ranch, and they weren't going to use those cows, what do you think they did? Shot them and let them rot. At the end of the Civil War, you wonder why, we're going to talk about this, you wonder why people moved westward? They had nothing to stay there for. Everything in the South was destroyed. They had nothing. Well, right in the middle of all this mess, guess what we have? A presidential election. The election of 1864. The presidential election. 1864.
Was everything we just talked about on the beginning and end?
What's that?
Was everything that we just talked about on the beginning and end?
I think so, pretty much, yes. You weren't that late, so.
I just didn't know if we did anything Friday, because I wasn't here Friday.
Oh, Friday we did what?
Watched the video and then worked on the worksheet.
Yeah, we watched a video on the Gettysburg Address, actually, and then worked on the worksheets, yeah. Now, Lincoln was pretty excited about the fall of Atlanta because he obviously thought that would give him a good chance to be reelected in 1864. Now, this is a weird election because this is the first election after what? After secession. Everybody voted in 1860, right? But now we've got a split union, so this is going to be a little different. So in the election of 1864, Lincoln is going to be nominated for re-election, and the man that he picks as his running mate was a little bit of an odd choice. His name was Andrew Johnson. He was a Southern Democrat, believe it or not, and Lincoln was a Northern Republican, right? So that was a weird choice, but he kind of wanted to balance the ticket because he knew what was coming soon. The end of the Civil War, in which he needed to reconstruct the Union, and he thought that a Southern Democrat might be good to have in his cabinet so he could negotiate better. So the Republicans nominate President Lincoln for the presidency, Andrew Johnson as his vice presidential running mate. Now, you want to know where's Johnson? Where's he from? He was a former Democratic congressman from Tennessee. So he's from Tennessee. Remember, Tennessee was one of those states that came into the Union, or seceded from the Union what? Kind of late, right? Okay. The Democratic Party, you'll never guess who they elect for president. If anybody can tell me who they elect for president, we have talked about this person in this test material, I'll give you 5 points extra credit if you can tell me who they nominated. Anybody in this row want to take a shot? Somebody, but a name that we've talked about in this green test material. And it's not a politician, I'll give you that much of a hint. Good guess. Nope. What do you say? Anybody?
Robert.
No, he's a Southerner.
Oh, who are we talking about?
What? He said George Meade. No, good guess. What? What'd you say?
George McClaren.
That's right. What'd you say?
George McClaren.
George McClellan was the very good. George McClellan was the Democratic nominee for president. How much political experience did he have?
None.
Cody? How much political? None. Zero. He's a general. Okay, but he was the Democratic nominee, and a guy by the name of G.H. Pendleton
I know that guy.
was his running mate. He was from Ohio.
Exactly.
Now here's a good one for you. Now listen to this. Listen to this, just a little bit of trivia. Guess whose son-in-law G.H. Pendleton was? Had to do with the War of 1812. Guess whose son-in-law was? Or guess who Pendleton's father-in-law was? Had to do with the War of 1812. Had to do with the Battle of Baltimore.
What is his name? A lawyer?
Yeah, what was his name? He wrote the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, that
The
one.
guy that was on the phone arrested.
Francis Scott Key. So this Pendleton that runs for the vice presidency for the Democrats in 1864 is the son-in-law of Francis Scott Key. Now, what if you're the Democrats, what are you going to campaign on? Which side of the war? Lincoln's for it. Against it. They campaigned anti-war. Anti-war, anti-war. And what the Republicans campaign on? Victory, so we can get the nation back together. What's that, Willow?
But didn't McClellan lead the war?
Yeah, but they had to have an opposite feeling to win, right? That's a good point, though. So the Democrats are hoping that an anti-war feeling will defeat Lincoln, and the Republicans are hoping that the capture of Atlanta and the fact that the war looks like it's almost over will help Lincoln. Well, there were 3 states that would vote in this election for the first time, ever. First time they'd ever vote in an election. Kansas, West Virginia, and Nevada. Those 3 states, this is the first time they ever vote in an election because they weren't states prior to this, okay? So, again, 3 states vote for the first time. Kansas, West Virginia, and Nevada. So 25 states are going to participate in this election. Nine states in the Confederacy would not participate. 9 states in the Confederacy would not participate. Which means how many Confederate states do we have? How many do we have then? $11? So why did the other 2 states get to vote?
They were neutral states, weren't they?
They were Tennessee and Louisiana. Why did they get a vote and the other 9 did not? Because those states were occupied by Union forces, whereas the other states were not yet occupied by Union forces. So you don't have to write this down, but Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas did not vote because they were not under the control of Union forces at the time. However, Tennessee and Louisiana were, so they got a vote, but they didn't count. They let them vote, but they didn't count. Okay? So, in this particular election, this is incredible. Lincoln gets 212 electoral votes. 212. You know how many were possible? 224. Pretty close. McClellan only gets 12 votes. 212 to 12. So Lincoln is re-elected, receiving 212 electoral votes in comparison to 12 for McClellan. We're getting close. The next subtopic is the Deep South falls to the Union. The Deep South falls to the Union. In December of 1864, General Sherman sends a telegraph to President Lincoln. In December of 1864, General Sherman sends a telegraph to President Lincoln. And the telegraph says, "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah." What's the significance of that telegraph? That tells Lincoln that what state is totally taken over by Union forces?
Georgia.
Savannah, Atlanta, Savannah, Georgia. So in December of 1864, General Sherman sent a telegraph to President Lincoln, and the telegraph stated, "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah." So let's think about this. So by January 1st of 1865, how is the Confederacy doing? They're all but defeated. I'll give you some examples, okay? First of all, Atlanta and Savannah had fallen to the Union, right? So he's making his way up to Virginia. Sherman had penetrated the Deep South and swept it clean, practicing total war. So they were swept clean. And how was the Confederate government doing financially? Bankrupt. So, by January 1st of 1865, it's looking sad for the Confederacy. Okay? They've lost Atlanta, they've lost Savannah, the entire South has been, Deep South has been swept clean, from Tennessee